This is James L. Coleman, and he was born on December 12th, 1923. He served in the U.S. Army during World War II and achieved the rank of E6. This was recorded in Davis, California on November 20th, 2015. Escher Barron is the interviewer, and he has no relation to the interviewee. This is a student-conducted interview from Da Vinci Charter Academy. Assisting the interview are Alexander Badawi Mishkovsky, Alex Pena, and Clara Silvestre. This interview is being conducted for the Veterans History Project at the Library of Congress. So could you please tell us your name?
Name is James L. Coleman.
And what is your birth date?
December 12, 1923,
Okay, and you served in the U.S. Army, right?
in the U.S. Army.
Okay. Cool. So, where were you born?
I was born in Ware, Mississippi.
And what were your family's occupations at the time that you went to war?
Oh, my father worked in a steel mill. I was raised in Buffalo, New York. And at the age of a year, when they moved to Buffalo, New York, and he worked in a steel mill. That was his job, working in a foundry.
Cool. So, do you have any siblings at all?
I don't, no, I don't.
Okay. So, what were you doing before you entered the service?
Before I entered the service, I was just out of high school. Went to Seneca High School in Buffalo, New York, and studied electronics.
Okay. Do you have any other family members that served in the military?
Yes, I had my brother Melvin Kiefer, and those two, they served in the Army, yeah.
All right. Cool. So, when you first heard about the issues in Germany and Italy, what did you think of them?
Well, you know, you were in school, and you noticed that the newspapers and the radio speaking about what was happening in Europe as the German army was marching across the Europe. So it had everybody concerned because they didn't know if they were going to come to the States or not. But that was the idea. They wanted to prevent them from coming to the States. So we knew we had the draft going on. Even though you were in school, you might be drafted, and that's what happened to me.
So, I know a little while before that, America wasn't really doing too much. They kind of waited out until Pearl Harbor, and that's kind of when we stepped in. So, what did you think about the United States kind of not doing anything before Pearl Harbor? Do you think they should have done more before Pearl Harbor, or?
18. You're not thinking in that vein of what they should have done, but you were concerned the fact that you knew that the Congress was working towards efforts for whether we should get into the war or not. And we probably would have been coasting along until Pearl Harbor, and then they made a decision right away to go to war. Before that, it was just assisting where they could.
Okay. And so, with the invasion of Poland, what was your reaction to finding out that Germany had invaded Poland?
Well, they knew that, as I said, they were marching across Europe there quite a bit because the United States wasn't involved in it directly. And so at that age, I really wasn't thinking about the exact what would happen, except that we know that we would probably be called to service if we had to go.
Okay. Yeah, makes sense. Did you want to go to war with Germany after hearing about the invasion of Poland?
Did I want to go to war?
Yeah.
I don't think I was in a frame of mind to want to go to war at that age, at that time. But they had a draft going on.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so if you wanted to be 4F, if you were 4F, of course you didn't have to go. But pretty much the people that were around, whatever the country called for, we were, we knew we had to go.
Right. And then the Lend-Lease Act. What did you think about FDR when he signed the lease, or the Lend-Lease Act?
Well, it helped Europe. It was a good thing because if he didn't, the Marshall Plan helped Europe get on its feet.
Okay. When the Atlantic Charter was proposed, were you aware of what it was for?
When the Atlantic Charter was formed, not exactly, but the general feeling, I think, was whatever the Congress thought was right for the country to do, we were in accord to doing that.
Okay. And where were you when Japan attacked Pearl Harbor?
I was at home in Buffalo, New York, and when I first heard the news on December the 7th, I was in the living room listening to the radio when it came on that the United States had been attacked in Hawaii. Yeah.
Okay. How did you and the people around you react?
Well, they knew things were getting tight because we had been practicing blackouts anyway. All cities were blacked out at night, even though we were thousands of miles away from the coast. You still were blacked out at night. You had to pull your shades down, dim your lights at night.
Okay. So, so with the Battle of the, do you know anything about the Battle of the Bulge?
Battle of the Bulge. No, I don't.
Okay.
It was going on, but I wasn't following it that closely.
Okay. So, did you agree with America's decision to enter the war?
Yes, I agree. Yeah.
How did you enter the service? Did you just kind of sign up, or?
Well, an interesting thing going on. The draft was on, and certain periods, certain days, they would have all men coming through the draft board would be U.S. Army. Some would be going to Navy, and then sometime they would say every other man in the line would go into either the Army or the Navy or the Marine Corps.
Oh.
And so when I was picked to go in the Navy at first, and I objected to going in the Navy. So he said, let him go in the Army. And so I went in the Army.
Okay.
It was just every other man that particular day.
Oh. All right. So can you tell us anything about your departure for training camp or the early days of training?
Ooh, let me see. Well, I started off in a camp Upton, Long Island, New York. And they put us on a troop train, and we didn't know where we were heading, but we ended up in Illinois in a cornfield area. This camp was built in a cornfield belt area there. And so we were in training in Camp Ellis, Illinois for a number of months, taking the basics of training. We're going through the regular training we have for combat. It wasn't much like combat, but just get familiar with what the Army rules were and discipline and whatnot. Because if you couldn't follow orders, they had a brig on the base there. See, you know what a brig is? No, that's a jail. So if you couldn't follow orders too well, or you ended up there, And but after that training was over, we put on a troop train. We were shipped to Camp Up in Seattle, Washington area, and we were shipped to Hawaii. And we stayed in Hawaii several months. And while we were there, we did jungle training there. And we didn't know where we were going, but we were just doing jungle training. And later on, they shipped us to, they put us on a ship, and we were on a ship with no convoy. And you should have, you would think you'd have a convoy during the wartime with submarines around.
Yeah.
And so we were on the water for over 2 weeks just sailing around, and we still didn't know where we were going. Till one morning they said we were hitting the beach, and that was Iwo Jima. And we were behind the Marine Division, one of the units that was the U.S. Army that worked with the Marines. And you don't hear much about, but the Army was there.
Can you tell us a little bit more about the jungle training? Like, what really was that?
Well, jungle training, you had to try to live off the land a little bit. Certain, you had to, the water that you had to use it sparingly, just in case. We did training for evacuating the ship on LSTs, because when we landed at Iwo Jima, which we didn't know we were going there, you had to know how to get off the ship and get on the LSTs. It's bouncing around in the water, and you had to do that training. And you had training with flamethrowers, but you hear flamethrowers.
Yeah.
Well, that was used.
Wow.
You train with flamethrowers,
Train with flamethrowers.
bazookas, the M1 training again.
I would not have expected flamethrowers. Wow.
Yeah.
So, how did you adapt to military life? The barracks, food, the physical training, and all that.
Well, of course, in the service there, everyone's got the same food going through the mess hall there. You go through the line there, and you expect to eat what you put on your plate, and they got you in the habit of not taking more than you can eat. Stuff like that. And sea rations, every person had so many sea rations each day was issued to him. And periodically, when you were when we were on Iwo Jima, you were given sea rations, and they were better than the old rations they had during World War I, but they're pretty good. It wasn't too bad. You put up with it. You knew it was the best you could get.
Okay. Can you tell us anything else about these rations? Like, did they have like chocolate, or were they just kind of bread, or?
Bread is crackers. No bread, crackers. They had a chocolate bar, Hershey bar in there, condensed type, not the fancy stuff you get, One thing that they did during the war that I think about now, that every ration issued had 3 cigarettes in it.
Oh.
I don't know if they still do that now.
Probably.
3 cigarettes per man every meal. Now, that got people in the habit of smoking.
Wow. Cigarettes.
During the war.
I did not know that.
Yeah.
What was your first impression of the war?
First impression. That's a good question. First impression.
Yeah, just first thing that came into your head.
Well, first thing, you try to protect yourself. If you're in combat or in an area where there's danger might be lurking around. And I only experienced that particular situation on Iwo Jima. And it didn't last all that long, because after a period of time, the Marines had pretty well isolated the enemy there, because they were dug in under the ground. They were in tunnels, and it pretty well got rid of them. But that's about it I could say on it.
Okay. Now, what about the uniforms? What did they look like, and would you consider them comfortable?
Oh yeah, they were comfortable. It looks slightly different than what they do now,
Oh yeah.
but we didn't have to shine our shoes anymore once we got in the combat area. You know,
Oh.
boots were they didn't require any polish or nothing like that. But
So was the whole base underground, or was it just parts of it?
base? What do you mean?
Like, you know, where you were stationed, where you got your food and things like that?
Oh, speaking of this situation around Iwo Jima, as far as there's no grass there, no trees, nothing but rocks, brown sand. It's a volcanic island that the ground is warm or hot, I would say. You could take a 56-gallon drum and bury it in the ground, cover it up, and overnight you could take a bath. The water would be that warm.
Oh, wow.
So it was pretty rough.
Okay. So, can you tell us where you served? What places you served at during the war?
Okay, let's see, I served. Well, Iwo Jima was a place actually a combat situation. But I served in Germany, served in the Philippines, served in Japan, in Guam. Those are where I was stationed at. And Germany, of course, I stayed there during peacetime.
Okay. So can you tell us any details, interesting details about your trip abroad, or if at all possible?
Oh, think of nothing really exciting except on a ship there. You had sailing across there. You line up for chow on the top deck and gradually get around to the mess hall, eat your meal, and then you come on topside and kill time by either reading or playing cards or gambling. Some guys gamble, you know. So, and you didn't have cell phones and nothing like that. You couldn't talk to people like that. You couldn't text anyone, you know. We didn't know what that was anyway.
Hmm.
It didn't exist.
Yeah.
There wasn't even television then, you know.
Oh yeah. Oh man, it's a whole other world.
Yeah, right.
So, during the war, did you know what was happening in the internment camps, or what internment camps were?
No, not specifically. Yeah, not but what a news flash or, you know, would come out with, you know. But specifically, I didn't notice it that much.
Okay. Were you at all, like, told about it, or not? Nobody told you anything?
Oh, you hear a lot of things, you know, during the war, and either through the radio. Most of our stuff came on the radio. News, time, like a Telethon, I think it was the name of in the theater, they used to have the news flashes, you know. But most of the news we got was on the radio.
Okay. How did you and your comrades or friends react to it? React to the news on the radio?
Well, the ones who were of draft age, they were apprehensive about when they would be called because you had a number.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah, you had a number. And if you haven't registered by all person, if you're 18 or older, you were registered. All males were registered.
what kind of things did you hear on the radio? Was it like, was everybody just waiting for their number, or was there maybe some music, or?
No, well, they didn't tell you over the radio. You got a letter
No letter? Oh,
addressed to you
gee.
for you to come and report to a certain draft board that your number has been picked. And that was it.
Okay. Well, okay. Well, what about the radio though? Was it purely for entertainment, or was there some news, or?
It was a little of both, you know. Of course, you listen to music, you can listen to music mostly, but then stories, Inner Sanctum, The Shadow, stuff like that. You never heard of it, I know that. They don't play those things anymore.
I think, wasn't The Shadow like a comic at one point?
Yeah, they had the Little Orphan Annie and stuff like that, you know.
Yeah.
You know.
I've heard
Jack
that.
Armstrong, All-American Boy, you know, they had that. So we could listen to those. And the wrestling matches, the Buffalo had a lot of wrestling going on the weekends on the Saturday night.
So, did you witness any actions or duties away from the front line? Any big things from the war that wasn't necessarily on the front line, but kind of in the back?
I mean, did I witness, what was that again now?
Did you see anything that was? Oh, what did you see anything away from the front line, like?
Not particularly, I can recall right now. No.
Okay. So, what knowledge do you have about the Tuscany Airborne Division?
You said division. I don't know about that division. But Tuskegee was an organization of black pilots in Tuskegee, Alabama. Of course, it was a contingent of over 19,000 personnel. And 950 pilots involved. 450 of them went overseas. I happen to be a member of the local chapter here in Sacramento, which is the second largest in the country.
Oh, wow.
And we just try to keep the legacy alive of the Tuskegee Airmen. They, for the feats that they did during the war.
Okay. Wow. That's pretty cool. So now we're going to talk about D-Day a little bit. Did you have any part in the military preparation or plan for the D-Day attack?
No, I wasn't involved in that at all.
Okay. What about the Battle of the Bulge? Were you involved in that at all?
No, because I stated during the war I was always in the Pacific. I wasn't in Europe.
Okay. So, if applicable, or if you experienced it, were there any emotions relating to combat, witnessing casualties or destruction?
Actually, the only Banzai attack that happened while I was on Iwo Jima was the last one they had, and it just so happened it was about a quarter of a mile off our flank. So I actually didn't see, I didn't get involved in anyone getting upset or anything because we had our perimeter set up, and there was no penetration at the time.
Okay. So were there any friendships formed and camaraderie of service? Did you have any friends that you knew, or?
Oh yeah, quite a few, yeah.
And so I want to go back to the Tuskegee Airmen. You mentioned a legacy. What was that legacy?
Legacy is the fact that these men were involved in something that the country disallowed. They didn't talk about it. It was over 20 years before the rest of the country knew that these men were flying planes over there in Europe, escorting the Allied bombers. When they first went overseas, they sent them to North Africa because no unit on the mainland wanted to have them attached to them. They didn't want to be associated with them. And this is during the war. You would think you want every able-bodied man under the earth fighting with you at all times. Well, anyway, they finally, after they left Africa, they sent them to Italy when they were fighting in Italy. And that's where they shot down a number of bombers. Each bomber had 10 men. So every time the Allies lost a bomber, that's 10 men. You lose 100 bombers, you got a bunch of men gone, right?
Yeah.
And so anyway, that's the legacy we try to uphold the fact. Right now, there are very few of the Tuskegee Airmen left now. There's only a few hundred left. You know, and they're all in their 90s, the ones they are. I'm 92.
92.
Yeah.
Did you experience any type of discrimination during your service?
You know, the country's full of that, you know that.
No, it's true.
You can't run out of stories on that. It affects everybody differently.
Yeah.
And it just so happens if you're there, you're there. That's a different ballgame. If I get started on that, you say, cut, cut, cut.
Oh, jeez. Okay. So, I want to ask you a little bit about your friends and family. Did you communicate with your friends and family back home?
Oh, sure. They had regular mail and what they had, Gmail. You never heard of that?
Yeah.
Gmail.
Yeah.
It was a short form you could sit, and it would go there supposedly faster. I don't know, but your folks could get it.
And so, would you write? How often would you write a letter home?
Well, I wrote quite often. I wasn't married then, and I write to my friends back home, and mostly to my mother and whatnot.
Okay. So what kind of thing would you write home about? Like, was there anything like interesting? Would you like write home about your daily activities?
Well, while I was at Camp Ellis, I would write and tell my mother to send me some of her cookies or send me a cake or a pie. And she would put it in the postal mail once a month, and I would share it with some of the guys in the barracks there with me. Because barracks had anywhere about 15 people in each barrack. Had long barrack, double bunk barracks. And I would share with them. You had to share it. If you didn't, it wouldn't last. Because you couldn't, you didn't have no refrigeration, and you didn't want ants and stuff floating around. So when you got the package, you just shared it to get rid of it.
Okay. Yeah. So, what did you do when you in your free time during your service? And did you have any hobbies? Did you?
Well, I liked photography, and I had a 127 camera. I used to use that. They don't make them anymore, with little small prints on it. And recreation, the guys would play cards or play volleyball or baseball. Or in the season, they play football among themselves and basketball games among themselves between the units.
So what were the kind of things you took pictures of?
People.
People.
Yeah. I like to take pictures of people. Don't expect it. They're just candid shots,
So just when someone was doing something, whatever.
No, I didn't care. Let's go and take it, you know.
Huh.
Yeah.
Interesting. And
With the digital, I was just thinking, then that time, you had cameras, they had like 15 shots that's all the camera had. So you had to pick what you're gonna shoot, you know.
oh yeah.
But otherwise you'd be out of film, you know. But with the digital age now, you just go crazy with shots.
Yeah. I sometimes go crazy with shots.
Yeah.
So, did you have a nickname in the Army? Or did people just call you by your name?
Lee, that's all.
Lee?
L-E-E, yeah, Lee.
Okay. While you were stationed, I remember where you kind of started out younger. What did you feel that you were fighting for when you were in the Army? Is there like an ideal that you kind of strived for, or?
Well, I tell you, I was 18 during that time, but your thoughts mainly was, I hope I can get back home, you know.
Yeah.
That's your main things you're thinking about at the time, at least I was. And I wanted to go to engineering school when I got back. But unfortunately, I didn't do that. I ended up staying in the service by enlisting at the time. And one reason why some people enlisted at the time, because jobs were down to zero. First about the war was over, you got 9 million people in the service, and all these people started getting out. Jobs weren't that around. So I figured the Army was a good place to start a career. I was just planning to stay just 3 years, that's all. And when that 3 years was up, something else happened. Then I said, just take 3 more, and you keep on doing it every 3 years. Before you know it, you might as well stay.
Yeah. So, you mentioned your nickname was Lee. Is there a story behind that? Is there?
No story. My mom just made put it on there.
All right. So, how did your family feel about the war?
Well, they were afraid for us to go into the service. My brothers and I. That was the thing. They were afraid of that. But after we had to go, yeah.
Yeah. So then how did your family feel about you being in the war? Were they also scared?
Well, I imagine so. I imagine they were. As I say, I wrote home to my mom regularly, quite regularly.
Okay. So, now, with the VE Day, Victory in Europe Day, what did you kind of do to celebrate? Was there like, when you found out it was over, were you just ready to go home, or was there like a little party, or?
When the war was over in Europe, I was on Iwo Jima. And he would say, when are they going to let me go home? Because you didn't have no idea when they would have your unit go or individual go. And so 3 of us figured out a way that we could get home quicker.
Oh.
We enlisted in the Army. So we enlisted in the Army, they sent us off, so we go home. But that meant that we had to stay and serve 3 years. But it was a time for where I could go in a different field than what I was in. Picked up a trade that served me well after I got out of service. So I went to electronics school, became a radio repairman, a microwave repairman, then a radar requirement on the height finders. And when I retired from the military, I worked at McClellan Air Force Base for over 25 years as a radar repairman. And we travel all over the world working on radar systems.
Oh. And so, what was your reaction to the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki?
We figured the war was going to be over soon when it happened. And it happened, you know. Of course, I was on Iwo Jima, and the guys there were wondering, hoping that the second bomb wasn't there to be delivered from there, because the bomb did a lot of destruction. It took thousands of people.
Okay. Earlier you mentioned the three of us. Who are the other two people?
Three of what? Go back to the question.
When you were talking about trying to get home faster, you said, I think,
Oh.
yeah.
Yeah. Oh, they were put out the word for re-enlisting in the service for 3 more years, and they were paying a bonus. I think I don't forget X amount of dollars. It was more than I had anyway. Probably 1,000. I think it wasn't that much, you know, but anyway, re-enlist, and you would go. You would be shipped out before your unit would be shipped out. And so we both signed up to go.
Were they just both? Was it just some friends of yours, or?
We were served together in the unit. You know, we were, in other words, been, what do you say, tent mates and roommates or whatnot. Going down a room, we have tents, you know,
Yeah.
pup tents and whatnot. So we had been together for over a year as a unit, so you knew them very well. Yeah.
Do you happen to remember these guys' names or anything?
You want to know something? Neither one of those guys. We all split up after we got overseas, and I never saw them again.
Oh, wow.
Never heard of them again.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. So, have you made any contacts with other veterans maybe that you didn't know during the war, but that also fought in the war?
Oh yeah, there's quite a bit. Let's say among the Tuskegee group, most of them, not all the members are former military, but and then I just went on a northern honor flight to Washington last month. And about 48 of the veterans that I'd never seen, never met before in my life. They're from all over Northern California. And we spent 2 days in Washington viewing the monuments on the mall. The honor flights. It was an honor flight for Northern California. There was other organizations throughout the country at the same time. It was 8 busloads of veterans at this particular date that we were there.
Are there any other veterans organizations that you are a part of?
That's the only one.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so, can you tell us how the wartime activities kind of affected your life, the experiences that you learned and gained?
The wartime.
Yeah, during World War II.
Well, of course, as I mentioned earlier, that I picked up a trade that helped me on later in life by going to the signal school at Fort Monmouth, New Jersey, and at Fort Gordon, Georgia. I was in signal units most of my career. And when I retired in 1965, I was hired on at McClellan Air Force Base to work on radar systems. And we would travel throughout the United States on the East Coast, the West Coast, Germany, Spain, Greenland, Philippines, Korea, Japan, checking radar systems. I was on the E&I squadron team. And it was a group of us. Sometimes it would be 3 of us, sometimes it would be 15 of us. And that's where we would go to different radar sites to bring them up to standards for that the Air Force required.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Were there any life lessons that you learned from your military service?
Life lessons. Well, try to be truthful to yourself, you know. Whatever job you're on, try to do the best you can. And try not to have too many excuses.
All right. So, what was the most shocking thing that you witnessed?
Shocking.
Yeah, something that surprised you.
I can't think of what is that shocking. I can't picture one offhand. No.
Okay. In reflection, do you think it was a good thing that the United States entered the war?
I think so. I've got a different picture now. I ever hadn't.
Yeah. That's true.
Yeah.
All right, well, that's all our questions.
It's all our questions. Would you do a half hour?
Yeah. We've got 41 minutes.
Okay, you can cut whatever you want now.
Pretty much. All right, thank you very much.
Okay, well.